This is one of the biggest leaks in gaming history. The entire 2030 Xbox lineup has been leaked. We're talking about a brand new Xbox Series X, updates to the Xbox Series S, a brand new controller, and what Microsoft are planning for the next generation. We're talking 2028, an all new generation of Xbox, and it is all fully leaked in this absolutely wild document. So this stems from the FTC. So Microsoft have been trying to purchase Activision for a while now, and as part of that, they have given over an enormous amount of documents, planning documents, and just a lot of stuff that has been a little bit embarrassing, emails, all this kind of stuff. But the thing that really jumps out to me is this document, which has gone accidentally live this morning. Now, I will say that this document dates from May 2nd of 2022, so it is a little bit over a year old, which means that some of the details might be slightly out of date today, but largely speaking, there is a huge amount of detail here that there's just not going to be time for them to change. So the controller, codenamed Sibyl, has been a massive point of an overhaul, and honestly, it's way more than I would have expected. So this is targeted for June of 2024, so around that normal sort of, I guess it used to be E3 timeline. And the things that they're going to be doing with this, I would argue, is a bigger update to the controller than we went from the Xbox One to the Series X. First of all, goodbye AA batteries. The rechargeable is finally going to be built into the controller, which, yeah, about time. There are also a lot of proper quality of life improvements. So there's going to be lift to weight the controller, which is such a good idea. I can't believe that someone hasn't actually done that already. We're talking about updated Bluetooth. We're also talking about the sort of two-tone finish, which looks a little bit more like an Elite controller in my opinion. And we also have modular thumbsticks with improved longevity. Now, when you look at this dock, a lot of what it seems like they're aiming for here is not only an improved controller that can be used not only on console, but also, of course, on mobile and cloud and whatnot, but also to make it a little bit more sustainable, right? So getting rid of those AA batteries, having a rechargeable built in, of course, USB-C, having the ability for you to fix your own thumbsticks at the very least. Now, what they mean by modular thumbsticks, I'm assuming is just like you can pop the stick off and replace it once you wear it out. I don't think it's something like, hall sensor and something that's significantly more, involved, but still a major update to the controller. We're also talking about motion controls in this. So there's going to be an accelerometer built into the controller, and the haptics are also going to double as speakers. When I look at this controller, what I really see is this is Xbox targeting a much more DualSense-like controller. I think that Microsoft would probably call a little flat-footed when they saw the DualSense controller and just how far Sony had pushed that. So now with a few years to work on it, they really kind of revamped this controller from top down. And personally, I'm very excited to get my hands on it. It seems like a pretty significant update. And then there's the brand new Xbox Series X, codenamed Brooklyn. So everyone who was expecting a mid-generation Pro console is going to be disappointed, because this is much more similar to a slim console, although it is a lot more than just a slim Xbox. First and foremost, the design is being completely changed. Now, when I first saw the Series X, and specifically the components inside, what struck me was it looks expensive. So not only are there two individual boards, there's a motherboard and there's a daughter board that are sort of sandwiched between this metal plate, and then the entire thing is cooled by one large fan which pulls air from the bottom. It's a very clever design, and it's a big reason why I think the Series X is so much smaller than the PS5. But it's also a big reason why I would be absolutely shocked to find out that the Series X is cheap to manufacture, right? Like, if you look at what's inside the PS5 versus the Series X, it is clear that Microsoft have invested a lot of money in a very clever design, but a very expensive design to manufacture. So designing a slim version of it, there's a lot of room for them to bring their costs down. But one of the biggest surprises here is that this Series X is dropping the disk drive. So yeah, you can see, it's a cylindrical box, somewhat similar to the Mac Pro, and I think there's some interesting sort of similarities there. But if this leak is true, and I certainly believe it's true, although I do think there's some details that likely have some room for change, they're targeting an all-digital lineup starting in 2024. So Series S, of course, never had a disk drive, but the Series X is going to drop the disk drive, and nothing I can see in these documents indicate that they are planning on offering it as an option, much like we're largely expecting Sony to drop the disk drive but still have like an optional attachment or accessory or something. That's a tough pill to swallow, if I'm being entirely honest with you. I understand that, digital is clearly the future and it's something they're pushing more and more. And if either of these companies are going to do it between Sony and Microsoft, it's going to be Microsoft, because they want you to sign up for Game Pass. They don't really care that much about physical sales. But I think there's going to be a lot of issues if they're just shipping purely digital consoles when it comes to retailers. Think about Best Buy or GameStop. Like, why are they going to really push your Xbox if they can't make any money selling physical games? If it's up to me, and this is just pure speculation, again, there's no basis of these rumors as far as in these documents, but I would be very surprised if there's not at least some kind of like disk drive attachment that you can purchase for the Xbox. There is now a USB-C port on the front of that new Series X, so to me it would seem like a kind of no-brainer to at least have some kind of disk drive attachment. But for right now, if we're just basing it purely on their roadmap here for 2030, they're going to have an Xbox Series X in 2024 with no disk drive and no backup. And I like how the tagline here is the most powerful Xbox ever, now adorably all digital. I mean, sure, adorably all digital. We'll go with that. Not gamers are going to be real mad that they don't have the ability to play their back compat games without, buying them again or using Game Pass. Now this will be shipping with that updated controller, and there are also some improvements on the inside. So one of the ones that I think is kind of interesting is the actual processor. So they're going to be shrinking it from the original 7nm chip, which I actually have one right here, down to a 6nm chip. Now that actually seems maybe not particularly ambitious, largely because Sony already did that exact 7 to 6nm swap, and they did it in 2022. So with the 1200 model of the PS5, Sony secretly shrunk the size of the processor to a 6nm chip, which gives them a little bit more power efficiency, and importantly, it's a little bit cheaper for them to manufacture. Now that seems like a very straightforward and easy update for the Microsoft crew, but I will say that the efficiency and the gains on that are very small. Like, it is a technically better chip, more efficient, a little bit cheaper to manufacture, but it's a pretty small difference. So the cooling requirements for this Xbox are likely not going to be enormously lower, which means that while this is going to be a redesign, I wouldn't expect it to be that much smaller, if I'm entirely honest with you. We're also talking about a new South Bridge, which again is going to help to refine some of the actual size and cost of these things. It is going to have faster Wi-Fi 6E, that USB-C, new Bluetooth radio, a pretty sizable upgrade. I would say a very healthy slim model, and they're still targeting it at $499, the exact same price of the Series X at launch. Now, because this is a digital-only console, and they're probably saving a little bit of space for the disk drive and packaging and whatnot, they're also going to have to offer bigger SSDs, and they do have that listed here in the actual list as far as a 2TB option. Next up, we've got the update to the Series S, codenamed Elwood. Now, this is a more minor refresh because it's not a physical redesign of the actual console. So we're talking about still $299, but making that 1TB SSD standard. And if you remember, just a couple of weeks ago, Microsoft released the 1TB Series S, but at $350. I actually really like the Series S, as you would know if you've seen that video, but making the 1TB model $300 makes a ton of sense. And there's even a reference here that when this model comes out, they're going to put the old Series S with 512 on fire sale at $199 for Black Friday. And that is a deal, my friends. Now, this will also be packaged in with the brand new updated controller. Now, they do say that it's got reduced power, although I don't actually believe this is going to be an updated chip, largely because I think that reduced power is going to be based on a better power supply and the better standby mode, but still a very nice little update for the Series S. Timeline-wise, we're looking at the new Series S launching in September of 2024, and we're seeing the Series X in November. And these are both, I would say, fairly nice upgrades. Now, it's certainly interesting to think about the fact that there's not going to be a pro version of the console this time around, but honestly, I'm not surprised by that. Phil Spencer's already kind of gone on record saying that he doesn't really find that there's a need for that. I kind of personally agree, but also, it's going to be a little bit of an awkward situation for the Xbox crew when Sony are going to be out here with a PS5 Pro for years, and there's really not going to be an Xbox counterpoint to that, except for the next generation. Yeah, my friends, it's not just mid-gen updates. We've also got to look at what they're planning for the next generation of the Xbox. I feel so bad for the Xbox guys that this leaked, but there is so much information here. It is wild that this thing is out here. And we're talking about options on how much they want to invest in these things, how many consoles they think they're going to sell. It's wild. But the thing that I think is also really interesting is the ideas for the future. Now, this is clearly not fully baked. They're specifically, they have Gen 10 investigations listed here, so it's something that I think they're well into development, but there's no way that that's locked down yet. But they're targeting 2028 for a brand new generation of Xbox. There's a lot of other stuff in this current gaps slide, which I think is really interesting to pull up. So not only a new Elite controller as well as a luxury controller, which is not currently funded as of 2022, but something they want to investigate. PC accessories, the ability to customize your Xbox via Design Lab, which I think would be really cool. They've already kind of played around with that with some skins, but the ability to actually fully customize your controller would be really nice. And then there's this not in scope for first party, kind of the off-limit stuff, which is like earbuds, remotes, controllers, handheld, which I find to be really funny. They're like, hey, we're not doing an Xbox handheld. There's also a sneak peek here at what the next generation would look like. Now, I will say out of everything that we've talked about, this is the thing that you have to have the biggest grain of salt for, because it's clearly Microsoft thinking about what they want to do, but there's some really interesting nuggets here. First and foremost is the idea for cohesive cloud gaming. The concept is that you would be able to leverage not only cloud resources, but also your local game to be able to play stuff that is bigger, that is higher fidelity. I remember that there was I think it was Crackdown on the Xbox One, that they had tried to do something similar, but it was a little too early. Now, what this really truly means, I think still feels like it's a little bit up in the air, but there are some really interesting nuggets for what we might expect for the next generation. So there are some things that Microsoft are specifically calling out as far as, does it make sense to go with an ARM CPU versus x64? And they're specifically calling out AMD Zen 6, which would be what they would be basing it on, talking about big versus little CPU cores, co-designing the GPU versus making their own or licensing the IP, having a neural processor, which is pretty much standard across the board for things like upscaling and whatnot. And then we're talking about things like next-gen ray tracing, a thin OS for super cheap, like less than $100 handhelds. Like, obviously, this is all just stuff they're planning, right? So it's super, super early. These are just the things they're thinking about. But this is our first real look at what the 2028 future of gaming is going to look like. And man, I feel like I gotta sit down after all this stuff. Can we just all appreciate this moment in history that we have seen such an enormously comprehensive look at the current and next generation of gaming? Again, I want to give a sincere apology to the Xbox crew, because the fact that this is leaked is brutal for them. But from a gamer's point of view, this is good news that Xbox clearly are very, very much investing in the future. This is not even counting a lot of the other stuff. I mean, there's emails from Phil Spencer talking about how he wishes he could buy Nintendo, but he couldn't quite pull it off. There's a ton of stuff from Bethesda. There's a lot of stuff in here, but I'm specifically talking about the console stuff because I personally think that that's the most relevant. And the fact that we're going to be looking at a very interesting update to the Series X and the Series S, and I'm very curious to see what you think in the comments, but also a sneak peek at what the next generation of gaming is going to look like is very, very exciting. Stay tuned, my friends. I think the console wars are starting to heat right back up. If you subscribe, you know that I'm gonna give you the play-by-play at 6 o'clock in the morning every time something leaks.